Hello, so I wanted to do a more in-depth look at the 1606 electromagnetic switch. Let me turn it on. There it is. So I have here the schematic diagram, and looking at it you'd think that looks quite simple, but it's deceptively complicated. There's a lot of decision making and stuff that has to go into this, and a lot of thinking through how people might use the module and how people might potentially destroy the module and trying to protect against that, and putting this out into the world as a product that is reliable and will work with all of the other URAC modules that you've got can take a bit more thought than is obvious at first. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that on the panel here we have A, B and a common, which is a single pole, single throw switch, but we are using double pole relays. See, there's two sets of switch contacts in there. Why is that? Well, that's because one side, one pole of the relay is switching the signals that you plug into the panel, and the other side is switching the LED indicators here. And the reason why you want that all done within the same relay is so that they are exactly in sync with each other, and it's also just the simplest way to do it. And you can see on this side of the relay, this is where we've got our LED indicator switching circuit. Now, you probably know that if you connect plus 12 volts to one side of an LED and ground to the other side of an LED, you'll blow up the LED because you need a current limiting resistor there to just calm things down a bit so that the LED doesn't overheat and burn up. So when the relay switch is connecting these two pins, pin 7 and 6, the current flows from plus 12 through the LED down to ground, and when this switches over to this side, it flows around this way through this LED and to ground. Now, why have I used 3 resistors here when I could have just used one on the common terminal for both of these LEDs? Well, that's because these relays come in all sorts of different configurations, not just double pole, double throw, and there are even configurations that connect pins on this side of the relay to this side of the relay, so you could potentially have plus 12 volts being sent out of one of these jacks, which could be disastrous if you short it to ground, and someone could easily plug the wrong relay in. Not to mention that when you pull this out, the pins that are connected to the LEDs are exposed to the outside world, and anybody could stick anything into there. So you want to protect the LEDs from all the nasty signals that could come in and potentially fry them. And you do that with these protection current limiting resistors. So if something nasty comes in pin 7, this 1 kilo ohm resistor will protect this, and if some nasty goes into pin 5, this 1k will protect this LED. And you want a 1k resistor here between plus 12 volts and pin 6 in case someone shorts that pin to ground. Then the current is limited through that 1k and it won't blow everything up. And when the switch terminals are connected together, these resistors add up, so you're getting a 2k series resistance, which is just the right amount of resistance to get the brightness that I like from these LEDs. I was quite excited when I found out that you can get all sorts of different switch configurations, and I went through all the possibilities, but unfortunately there's not a way to make them all compatible really in the same module. It would have been cool to be able to have all sorts of different switching capabilities by just swapping out the relays, but it didn't really work, unfortunately. So that's this side of the relay talked about. Let's focus on this side here, which is the main business of the module, the signal switching. It's very simple. It's just a direct wire when the switch is connecting these terminals. There's no series resistance because you don't want to mess up with the input and output impedances of different modules that you may be connecting together. You will notice, however, that there are 10k pull down resistors on the normal connections, the normal switched connections on these jacks. Now when you've got nothing plugged into these jacks, the tip is connected to the normal pin, and when you push a jack in, that will shove the normal pin out of the way, so it's no longer connected to the tip. The reason you want these pull down resistors is, say you've got a jack connected to the common and you're listening to the output of this. If this is connected to B, well, you're just listening to a wire floating around in space, and the module that that's connected to may not like that on its input, and it could do unexpected things, and you don't really want that. So by having this 10k pull down resistor, you just pull down the signal to ground, and you know what to expect on the input of the next module in the chain of your patch. Now you will notice that if you're listening to the output of B and that is connected to common, that's all good because you've got this 10k resistor pulling it down to ground. But then when this switch switches over and connects common to A, suddenly B's not connected to anything. And the 10k resistor, that's out of the circuit because you've pushed the normal pin out of the way. So you are listening to a floating wire. There's not really a way to get around that because you don't want to start introducing pull down resistors in the actual signal path, because then again you're messing with the input and output impedances of the modules that you're connecting to these switch terminals. All you have to do is just be aware of that, and if you're taking an output and having one of these jacks disconnected, you need to take the output from the common, and that way, no matter where this switch is, it'll always be connected to either something plugged into a jack or a 10k pull down resistor. Okay, let's move on to the other side of the relay, the more interesting part, the coil. And if you look here, you can see it. Just miles of enamelled wire wrapped around a pole piece. And they are fascinating things, these coils, technically inductors, which we will refer back to later. And as you know, if you pass a current through this wire, there is a magnetic field created, and that's what actuates the switching.